Here's a quick little project I'm working on for a friend while I can't be anywhere or doing anything else. He's got a typical half-inch copper water line, and he's got a gate valve with a bleeder on the side of it. And after that, he's got the little vampire connection to supply water to their fridge upstairs. And then this copper line went over and up in this area of the house, relatively new construction here, and turned and went out loosely to the outside where there is a hose bib where they connect the garden hose. The problem with that is that valve, when you turn the handle outside, stops the flow of water right there. So from that valve all the way inside and all the way through to this here stays full of water under water pressure unless you actively close this valve, open that one to let atmospheric pressure in, and no more than a little dribble of water that's in there should fall out of it. And then you open this little bleeder, which is why it's here, and you collect that water each year before we get cold weather in this climate, which we're climate zone 5. Otherwise, the water that's in there under pressure over in that copper pipe, that's right outside. As soon as you go through this lumber right here, this is the outside corner of the house. That's directly to outside. And it's loose. There's no great stuff foam. It's all just daylight around that opening right there. Where is it? Right there. Okay? Nothing there to seal it. So, when we get freezing cold temps, if that should freeze, it will expand in there and immediately break the valve or the copper. And then the water pressure will rush out either immediately or as soon as the temperature comes back up a little bit, and continue to spray water, and this whole area will be soaked. All this insulation blanket will be soaked. There'll be frozen ice and water and everything all over that area, all over outside. And if you're not around, all it takes is 10, 15 minutes, let alone overnight or anything else like that. The amount of damage that can occur, the cost that can be incurred is incredible. And this house, as young as it is, should have never been plumbed that way whatsoever. What you want is a frost-free silcock, which is going to feel and look the same outside. Okay, a little spigot where you can turn the water on. But when you operate this handle, the valve that you're opening and closing is way back here. Now, these are different lengths, probably an 8, 10, and a 12-inch. And I'm not sure what we'll need, 8, 10, 12. But you want that valve way on back because when you close it, all the water that was up to that point, basically, before, when you close it, this can always, be free of water. It is completely empty every time you close that valve. So the tube that goes to the outside and comes in a ways before the valve means that the water and water pressure stay inside the heated envelope of the house, where it just has to be above 32 degrees, which it should always be here. Now, you should have insulation as it's kind of looks like it is there. It's not good enough, certainly not. This is a 2x4 framed. Oh my God. Anyway, the depth of that cavity is extremely shallow, but really you need insulation in there regardless, as much as you can have, because that's the edge of the rim joist, and if you've got an insulated wall above it and insulation on the basement wall below it, you need insulation in these areas, otherwise it's just leaking your heat out all the way around. So regardless, this would be warm and it wouldn't freeze. So we're going to replace that, because to start with, the hose is stuck to it and can't come off outside. It's been threaded on and won't unthread, and it was always incorrect. And the problem is that after this isolation valve, where you can drain the water out, is where they attach the fridge, not before. So if you come down here and you do your due diligence in the end of the year, and you let the water out and you close this valve, you can no longer use water outside incidentally on a warmer winter day. For example, they have a hot tub, okay? So in the winter, you like to use the hot tub, but the hot tub loses water, so you want to top the hot tub up so you can't turn the water pressure off to that spigot outside without coming down here to turn it back on, go out about your business, fill the hot tub up, turn the hose back off, come back inside, close this valve, and bleed it. And that's super, super annoying. So for these people specifically, this is not a solution. And when you turn this off, not only can you not fill the hot water or fill the hot tub, you don't have water to the fridge, because this should have been put upstream, not downstream of the valve. So we've got a double plumber failure here by yours truly. Chazzy has identified that, and I'm not a plumber, and plumbers are the first people to pipe up when I'm doing new construction plumbing or plumbing some of my renovation projects if I get some small detail funky. But it's like, this is what I find time and time again, and it's not just in old construction. This is quite new construction. Otherwise, good solder and other things like that. Nice valve at 90 degrees and the existence of this valve to start with, but not understanding that this should have been upstream, and not understanding that that is absolutely not what you do for a hose in this climate zone is bonkers to me. So what we're going to do is, and I've cut it off here, and eventually I'm going to cut it off more like here, because this is a penetration that can't be fixed. This is a one and done piercing thing. So we're going to get it cut off here. We're going to clean the end up. We're going to push to connect a coupler. We're going to go to PEX out the other end of it. We're going to go over there into a push to connect silcock and out through the house, which really what we're going to do is going to cut this copper and take it down and out, which is why I have to cut it there, because I'm going to pull that stick straight out and I can't pull the elbow and then the rest of this. So we cut it here. We cut it there, we take the copper down, we go outside, we work out what length silcock is going to come through and stop and allow us to comfortably turn in PEX and come down the side of this joist without slamming into it or being too tight of a bend. So it may end up being the shorter one as a result, if we don't feel like doing a big hole cut through here, so we can get a nice long one and get well into the airspace of the basement. But the thing is, coming through deeper from this wall through this joist with all the time and effort to get through the joist, we're still no further away from this outside side of the house. So really we just need to get into this region and keep this region. We want to insulate. We want to put some fiberglass bat, or really some styrofoam, back up on the far side of this silcock when we're all done, so that it stays in the envelope, and the insulation on the far side of it protects it from the cold air coming in, or the trade-off of energy that occurs when this warm air can zip right through that wood with a terrible R value and equalize, to the cooler outside or be traded as energy. So without being too esoteric, we're going to cut that off up there. We're going to go outside and we're going to use the frost-free silcock that we worked out with math we want to use. We're going to push to connect PEX onto the end of it outside. We're going to push all that PEX back through the hole and push the silcock up and screw it into the outside of the house. We're going to come in here and turn that PEX and come down and turn and go into this coupling. And then we're going to reapply the water for the fridge upstream on this line from this valve. And then we're going to open that water back on and leave it on. And then we're going to go out and we're going to cut the end off of the hose that's stuck to the old hose bib. And we're going to put a repair end on it, just as a matter of best practice. Put a fresh end on it, and we're going to then thread this fresh end on that old hose back onto our new frost-free silcock. And thereby, throughout the wintertime, they can go outside, turn the water on, top up the hot tub, turn the water back off again. The water will be stopped well inside the envelope of the house. They won't need to use this valve, but it'll be here if they should choose to do so. For example, like if you're going to go out of town on vacation, if you're not going to turn the main water supply off, at the very least, you can turn this stuff off to have a little bit more peace of mind. And of course, when that's off, if somebody's watching the house and they want a cold drink or ice cubes or water, this being on the upstream side will allow them to do so. Cool? Oh, meanwhile, he had the sump pump backing up when I came down here to this point. And you can see now that the water has backed off. Where can we? There it is here. So we've gotten the water level since I was here to come down, and the pump is running now because of course it wasn't running and he didn't know what the issue was. So the first thing that I did was, because it's water and electricity, just as a best practice, I found myself a little wooden stick and I wrapped on that pipe, because I assumed that incidentally running, periodically running, the float that is meant to slide up and as a switch turn the pump on based on the water level coming up. I assumed that the water level came up and the float had some schmutz where it slides from whatever that may be, and it couldn't slide up and activate the pump so that the pump would run. So by wrapping on that pipe a little bit with that stick, just a tap, 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 I started to hear the pumping running, and now I can see the water level coming down, because I know that there's a good chance that basically that float switch is schmutzed up, because it's not all the time running here, which is good. But if it's another situation like it doesn't run all the time, but it does run sometimes, you have other sump pump problems, like making sure that your float switch is a really nice one in good shape and in good keeping, or that you've got a redundant one in the event that the one doesn't work down in there. You can have one built out off of the wall here, like a toilet bowl looking thing that hangs down in, and well before that water comes out the top, you can see quite obviously that the float will cleanly activate the switch the redundant switch. So there's some improvements that could be made here, because again, this should happen while they were out of town now for the next week. You get home and all this stuff is all soaked with funky, disgusting water. Not to mention, I just banged my head on this beam because somebody made a 6-foot deep basement in this new build construction, and they should be drawed and quartered. I can't imagine that it made any sense. The amount of square footage that this house could have had down here as livable space if it had just had an 8-foot ceiling, even with the forced air, which I hate. It's just unbelievable amount of value left on the table as a result of that. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Back to work. Question is, will the hole? Nope. Hole's not going to be big enough. It needs to be over drilled. So that's one thing. Let's get that. All right. One of these here, you want to over an inch and an eighth. And you want to be careful you don't break him off, because it's a little violent clattering around the old hole without a center until it takes a bit of a feel. And I did, break the siding a little bit here more than it already was, but you want to be cognizant of all of this. However, you get that hole opened up, you get your pecs going in there, you give it a little zoop. And the nice thing about push to connect is that I might even be able to do it one-handed, because all you have to do is push to connect. And then we put this guy in there through the hole. And it's unfortunately, nope, that's because of the tension on the pecs. So you kind of want it downhill so that when you turn the valve off, the water that stands in that tube runs out on the ground. And we would be able to do that here, except I can feel that the pecs coming out the other end is running into that joist. So let's go. Okay, so yeah, so what do, because that's going to damage the connection. And that's the shortest silcock, and no amount of any shorter is going to help it. So we're going to grab that drill bit and we're going to put a hole through over here that lines up. And then we're going to go back out and back in so that the pecs can do a nice easy bend through that hole before we mung up that connection at the silcock. So let's do that. Okay, that's all we needed there. And then we can bend it around here, but we got to go out and get that thing attached. Got some coated T25 drive, and you want to be careful. This is newer, and I know there's practically nothing underneath this, so this length will be enough. Start getting into multiple layers of siding and stuff like we were at another project recently, and you're going to end up wanting a longer screw, and a lot of times you want enough of a screwdriver tip so that the motor of the driver isn't rubbing up on this handle, but it's back here, and you can come in real nice and kind of as straight as possible. And so that's actually the function of this little plastic guy here, is to sort of tip by pulling things in tight. He's a little wedge shape, and he tips the angle of this downward to kind of force it so that, the water always falls out of it rather than sitting in there. So let's get that drill that we left in the basement, screw this in, and then we've got to get here, cut the hose off the old assembly, put a repair end on it, attached to there. All right, okay, I'll show you that outside in a minute. We got that all in. The problem became the length of the screws, not quite long enough. You've got plywood sheathing around that, and if the hole wasn't carefully drilled through everything and the plywood sheathing is actually cut back from there, you've got to go that much farther to get a hold of some wood in a meaningful way. So anyway, we came through this thing, but then we got to do an easy bend, like a big S, and another easy bend, and get lined back up here where we're going to connect. May as well use this hanger, so it's, want to be careful, it's scraped on the plastic a little bit, which you can take a little bit of that, especially if it's like a flat operation instead of like a nail tip or screw tip when it cuts deeply. Then you want to be careful of that scenario. But in drilling through and doubling back around and through there. We're going to be lined up here, and someone could cut this shorter and do something different with it in the future if they need to, but we're going to stay on the center line of the floor system to the best of our ability and avoid other systems, whatever. So we'll clip it. That PEX will be clean enough to go into the coupling, which is here. And you saw me clean up the other end, push to connect half by half coupling. Saw me clean up the other end of the copper so it's nice and shiny, as well as deburring with a deburring tool, which swivels, but that goes in the end, and you just clear off the little sharp little ridge that's left from the cutting operation that you did when you cut the pipe off, because that sharp inner ridge that you got to get rid of can lacerate the seal on that push to connect fitting, and then you wreck your push to connect fitting, which are pretty costly, and obviously you got to go back to the store. And obviously, rather than being done at that point, you're not done still. So let's cut the PEX, slap that connector in there. Let's not forget to tighten the bleeder before we open the valve again, or that'll just spray water. That was closed outside and I repaired the hose. So anyway, yeah, let's come back and see how everything looks inside. Okay. Open ye old valve. And you get what you asked for. No drips, no moisture. Not beautiful, but it's right where it belongs, where nobody looks at it. Let's go downstairs and look. Water?
No.
No water. Okay, let's go find out. Okay, a little bit of the old pest block juice. Into the actual hole to the best of my ability. And then the can can take a shit, I guess. That's cool. A lot of times if you can get the area wet as the result of a plumbing project, the moisture will collaterally cause the foam to rise, because that's the reason that it foams to begin with. Now we got some other openings over here that it won't hurt. Now that we've got a can popping for the heavy 220 line that goes out to the hot tub. And we'll do that up. We'll do this other random hole. And this is pest block, so it's got a good R value, but it's also got, I think, like, at least it tastes terrible. More so than the other stuff. But it might have milled fibers in it, steel fibers or glass fibers or something, like anything like that. Our rim or our sill plate is cracked there, so I'll do what I can with that. I don't know whether or not we got problems. This is another place where I can feel a breeze there, so I'll just do that. And this is an ancient window, despite the age of this house. Someone's already great stuffed it. I might go across the top just for good measure here. Yeah, for sure I can feel the breeze, and I can see that the foam went right outside. So, as messy and ugly as that is, you kind of don't want, and I don't want to get it on these cushions for their outdoor furniture, but I want to make the most of this little operation, so we'll get this. Come on, friggin' cans. I'm using that fiberglass that somebody packed in there almost as backer rod. At this point, get that up there. Yeah, that was an afterthought. I should have realized to pull that out, so that'll be all the further I go there. So yeah, then we got to go figure out what the problem with the saddle valve for the where is it? Refrigerator water. The little gasket that sits right around where it pierces the line is missing a chunk right there, see? So we'll just go get a new saddle valve, and we'll do that before we finish piercing the line, wherever that would be here, because we don't want to do that, and then I don't have a good way to shut water pressure off on the other side of this valve. So the smart thing to do is just going to be brand new saddle valve, even though it's another trip to the store, because if I should run it all down and pierce it and sitting there leaking, that's one thing, but taking it off from there and throwing a new one on, I still got to do the same trip, and then I don't know how to turn the water pressure off, and we're going to end up with water on everything here trying to swap them. So new saddle valve, then we're done. There you go. Ended up with that new saddle valve. That was just an easier, I mean, $10 down the street, a couple minutes and back. That little black rubber valve just lost a little chunk because it gets pressed when the first one was installed. Everything gets squeezed down really tightly, and it stays squeezed for years and years and years. And then even though I cut that section out so I didn't have to get overly rough with it, and I had it in my hand on that little piece of pipe when I disassembled everything, the little piece of rubber chose to stay stuck to the copper and thereby tear off of that little rubber seal, and then you're just going to have the chance of it dripping. And the thing is, if it starts to drip when I reinstall the whole thing, I got to stop the flow of water to this whole area, and then when I take it apart, we're still going to have a bunch of water fall out, and then I'm going to have to put a new one into that same old hole that I pierced with a used valve rather than the first one and done hole that I should pierce with a brand new valve. Thereby I chose, let's just go get ourselves a $10 valve. It is an extra trip to the store, but now we got no dripping, and this valve may be used, like I say, in the future if necessary. We reused that little hold down. We did an easy bend there. We do an easy bend here. We did a drill in the center line of the joist here. We do a couple easy bends. We drill that over there. We put some foam pest block there and around on that there. That little drip outside, they can peel that off now that it's cured up at their leisure. And lo and behold, the sump crock is dried out and the level is staying where it should. So that's another solution there. So now all we got to do is a bathroom remodel. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you. So here's a light remodel, or more accurately, maybe a renovation, but a facelift even. Maybe that's the most accurate way to put it. To my buddy's bathroom, and most importantly, the shower area, the surround above a tub, had an old installation technique. Even though this is quite a contemporary house, quite a new house, only a few decades old, we had plastic, then we had drywall, and then we had tile, which is no bueno, because your grout around the tile is porous, your drywall is porous, none of which is supposed to stay wet all the time, but when you pull the moisture through the grout into the drywall, then the drywall stays wet, and thereby the grout basically stays wet, and you end up with mold growing on the grout, especially in low areas, because it does dry at the top, being warmer, especially in a forced air house, but also due to gravity, the moisture is being pulled, but it's all happening so slowly that between showers, it's only ever drying toward the top, and gravity's always pulling the water down, but then you re-up a shower, and so thereby, it's always wet, and it's always growing mold, and you can't stop it from growing the mold because it never truly dries out. So he pulled this all down because they hated this look of this bathroom, and did a pretty good job there. But then he was putting drywall up, and I said, whoa. We got to get, I mean, whether or not he keeps this plastic is one thing. Luckily, all the black mold and stuff had stopped at the plastic, which is, quote unquote, doing its job, I guess. So the lumber, etc., isn't all moldy. But at this point, we're going to do... not Dietra, but Schluter or Curdy board. It's got the membrane that you can put on drywall already on it. It is lightweight, and it can just go right up as the board paneling, and it's ready for, after a little bit of a procedure where you seal all the gaps in it and all that, you follow their tutorial, then you can stick your tile right to it. But just as soon as you get through the grout to that orange surface is waterproof, and so that grout can dry out because of its exposure to the air, its overall thickness, gravity pulling that water down. You have a far easier time of keeping the grout dry to where microscopically speaking, it's basically a desert, and you can't get mold started on it, and it certainly can't live on it quite easily. So that's what we're going to do here, because of course that's what you got to do for code as well. But first and foremost, we're going to try to keep as much of this copper water supply system here as we can, and we've got to drop your elbow on this tub, which is kind of nice, and we got to drop your elbow on the shower. And we're just going to cut that and take that old mix valve off and put a new mix valve in. Now, I had assumed that it would be a cartridge style that we'd replace it with so that it could be updated in the future, which is why I suggested we do this now, because you can update it then through the front. But I see we got swindled here, and in the box store Moen brand, which is the absolute bottom level of Moen, you don't get one that can be changed from the front, I don't believe. I might be wrong here. I don't think it is. It isn't like the one I did recently. So anyway, we got to deduce what and where we should cut this copper so that we have enough left to get into this and kind of preserve these routes. We've turned the water pressure off. We've opened this valve up. We're going to get this scooch-in and this handle out of the way and proceed to cutting this off here and see if we can fit this guy in. Or we potentially could take this opportunity to get a valve that can be changed, like with a cartridge in the future. We'll see. Okay, here we are back again on my buddy's bathroom reno project. Just took a couple days because the wind had the power out at the plumbing supplier, and they wouldn't sell me anything without the system, and the system was down. This is what you want nowadays. I'd be remiss if I allowed them to install another non-cartridge type mix valve, especially being generally plastic guts, ultra cheap, non-serviceable, sealing it up in a brand new scenario with all this hard work and effort to get the expensive Curdy board and tile all of this, especially if it's not a scenario where it's like a pony wall where you can be around on the other side, make a drywall repair after you get it right, if you should have a problem after that. We're backed into a corner here that no one wants to get in work inside of. We just want to one and done this, so I dragged my feet on letting them put that in, and we got what you want here for very little extra cost. But this is a test cap on here. The actual guts to the cartridge will come with their escutcheon and the, appearance, finish controls and faucet and shower head. And we've established that they like a certain one and then it's on order, etc., etc. So this here's what you want on the day to get into place. Then all the other work can take place down to tiling and grout and all that, seal the grout. And then by the time he comes to put all the beauty, appearance, finish plumbing on, he'll have that component and it'll go right into this. Bing, bang, boom, Bob's your uncle. Now, a few considerations. Firstly, I found up written on it at the back, which is obviously there. And we're going to go in with a solder connection and bottom out essentially where the end of the threads are. So where my edge of my thumb nail is. So if we put it up here for comparison, it looks like we need all of this copper cut right where it goes into the hub of this old valve to get right back into there. Same case on the right. And as far as the top, very similar scenario to there and out the bottom. And of course those are slightly variable, more so top and bottom, because we're basically hanging from the shower location, and as long as we're in left and right and we have enough shower tube, we can put it back together by cutting it up to fit, or we can bring it down a little bit until we get into trouble doing that, which we don't have to do here, so don't worry about it. But then coming over and up in for the faucet, if that needs to move up or down as a result of this new valve, not a big deal here, because all this construction that comes later will be accounting for that, and we've got plenty of wiggle room on that. So I got to cut that off, and I can't use this type of cutter because it rolls tightly on the edges of or on the surface of the pipe to make a plumb cut all the way around it. And in this case, I'd be half on the hub, which is bigger in diameter than on the pipe. So to cut it right there, I'm using this incorrect blade in my oscillating tool, and we'll get this guy cut out of here. We'll clean up and prep all four ends of that scenario there, and we'll also use some tinning flux on all of that and put it back together again, so that essentially, boy, do I hate doing it that way. Take it back. We'll take this tub stub drop ear off and endeavor to get the drop ear off up here, and take this shower head neck, twist him out of the drop ear, and take it down and put the upper route to the shower and lower route to the tub into that valve on the bench or on the floor or wherever I can get it done here. And then with those connections soldered, I'll put it into place, get the hot and the cold into the side of it, and continue to heat on that and do what I can for a good solder joint left and right. That's trying to, I won't even have this here, but trying to work up, around, upside down on that, it's not a good idea. So that'll be the order of operations that we take. And we got to get it in there and waterproof or watertight, because if we should turn the water back on here and it should leak, we got to turn the water back off, and the only choice we have here is the water main. There is no isolation to this, and if there were a valve or two, I tried them, they're fully frozen, so I'm not going to mess with those, or they'll be leakers sooner rather than later. So it's a race against time, and to be friendly and helpful for free here, get this much done for him so he can do the rest of it. Let's see what we can make happen. There you go. Not that violent, not that loud, although to some extent a little violent, to some extent a little loud, more so than using the other type of tools, but we've got what we need here. We've got to clean this all up. There can't be any of this, whatever we're going to call that, inside and out needs to be clean and bright and free of burrs. And then we'll take this and the other component out. And nice, it's actually handy that the drop ears are on there, because then if we put things on its back on the floor, that will orient this component, and the orientation of the other, these rotations will be controlled if I lay this whole thing down flat somewhere, maybe on the basement floor, and get it soldered together, and then come up and add the side connections in. Let's. All right, got everything wire brushed outside, deburred inside. Any heavy extra solder I sliced off with the razor first and then rounded it out. I've been using their emery boards or nail files. I don't have everything with me here. This isn't a full-blown project, so I use that to sort of sand out and around on the outside, which they work normally very good, and I have them in my kit. I ran the circular brush on the outside of this tool in all 4 ports, back and forth 50 times each, and around the outside 50 times each there, plus the deburring and everything else. Now I have pizza hands, and it doesn't matter, you know, if it's nothing other than just regular old body oils. I'm going to wipe everything all down with alcohol or acetone here, and then we're going to find up again, and we're going to put the tub outlet in the out bottom, and it with so after we clean it with some tinning flux, and lay things on their back so that the flatness, we'll get that dialed so that that's nice and straight away with the tinning flux in there, and his new torch and roll of plumber's solder, which is specifically for potable water plumbing, not electricians, and some other types of solder are not acceptable. So you want to make sure that's the scenario there. So we'll get this much, and actually I can't get into the drop ear through next to there easy, so we're going to get that much soldered and come back. I'll have to loosen those and slide them out in a way to get into the sides of this with tinning flux into the top, and then I will be having to do my very best solder left, right, and top, which is a help that it's on the top. I'll do it in place. And the only other thing that we want to make sure of is these are nice rigid routes, but hopefully that puts the depth of this unit and the amount that it sticks out of the face of the finished wall in a usable place. And there's directions that are included, and if you have to start moving it in and out, probably in this situation the easiest thing to do to gain up to almost an inch is to basically let go of this block once this has all been soldered in place and deflect this in or out, effectively bending these to a certain extent, and then re-screw this block back in when you've got it where you want it. That's probably, even though it's not pretty and beautiful, the amount of work necessary to move them over so that everything's nice and plumb if you have to move this in and out is ridiculous here to go to that kind of effort. You do want to be aware of the tipping it in and out and the fact that it's going to deflect the port out of which your shower head turns. So at a certain point, you can try to dog leg, which is to bend and then bend back in this stick, or you could cut it and solder and go to PEX, and cut it and solder and go to PEX, and put PEX in the middle of it. So, and then control that for vertical, and then the PEX does the bend, and then we go back to vertical on the new location for the valve's depth, all of which can be handled once the valve's installed and holding water pressure again, at least for the first time here. So FYI, that's why I'm not being real tough on that. I'd like to think that generally these are engineered as replacements and they work out correctly. This body here is off of this center line. The face of it off the center line is real close. We could certainly compare it to the existing valve that came out of here, but that is for another time. Let's get this soldered for right now. All right, we got ourselves a good solder at the bottom. Came back and let go of these and got either side hot and cold in there. The tinning flux is showing, and the top is also drawn, and this is all rigidly buckled in. I wiped my hands off with alcohol. I don't have an acid brush here, which is just a type of disposable paintbrush, but it won't hurt to get the flux kind of everywhere that we're trying to promote adhesion and penetration and capillary action with that solder. And so now we got to pump a bunch of heat back into this, and I had a bunch in here and then dipped it in the sump crock, because it's of course the only cold water source I've got right now since the water's off. But at this point we're going to pump enough heat into these 3 places to get what it looks like good solder joints. In fact, I'm going to throw this towel over this area of the tub, and so that we haven't got, and it's damp too, so that won't hurt. But it will keep us from damaging the finish. If this was brand spanking new, I wouldn't be in here with my shoes. I wouldn't let any of this grit get in here. Nothing. But that's not the case. So anyway, we'll get that soldered up, and then I'll immediately put the water pressure on. I don't know. Yeah, so you can turn that. I don't know if that does anything. Hopefully I didn't open that bad boy, because I don't actually know. It must ship closed, and the case may be that you can't open it until you take this off and put the cartridge in. Not sure. Anyway, we'll see. The water coming up to this point would cool it. The problem is it's going to push an air bubble, and if you've got the controls and you can let the air out and you're hearing and a little bit of water comes up and then you close it, that cool water will cool off everything as a best practice. But we can't actually let the water reach us here. It's going to push an air bubble that just sits there hot as hell. So I'll have to turn the water back on and soak a towel like this with cold water, wring it out, and come up here and just throw it on everything to try and take the heat out as soon as we don't need the heat in there anymore. But yada, yada, yada. Sorry, haven't got any time lapse. Going to get this soldered and do that much. We'll come back and see if we've succeeded here. Well, she fought us a little bit, no matter how well you understand the problem. You just have to go through the steps to fix it. If you end up with a little leak in a solder joint, you really ought to take it all the way back apart again, clean it all up quick, put this flux on it, and resolder. So that's what we ended up doing. But I use a push to connect cap on the end for now, which will slide back off when he's ready with his tub faucet on the end. And I just capped this because I actually wasn't able to hold water pressure with that test. They sent a test plug for one thing, but not the other. This is just easier and better. It just needs to dry off. So he can commence to getting ready with his Detra and all that, and then let me glance at it and then tile this thing. But that there was the hard part, and I'm glad I got to take care of that. I also ended up, so I had to let go of the drop ear and use the old shower neck as a lever arm to spin it in there and ultimately remove, clean up both pieces, and then put it back. And once I had it hot and solder all back in there, I kept it hot and just spun it back a little bit, then brought it back to where I wanted, let it sit up, and hopefully in the socket of the solder joint, it smeared it around real good and got a really good bond in there, which I tried just doing that before taking it all apart, but no dice. Solder, it's just a pain in the butt. You get everything just perfect and you do your very best, but as soon as you try it and introduce water and you have a problem, trying to get it to dry is a real, in the horizontal run, it's a real problem because it just keeps falling out and landing where you're trying to work, and you get it dry and then some more water rolls along and gets it wet again. In this vertical, it was really ideal that I could turn the water pressure back off and open the slop sink in the basement, and all this would fall right away. And in heating that, I could cook out the steam and it would go right to dry and then start heating up again, being in a vertical orientation. So that's good. I start getting into a horizontal thing and you really end up with trouble. So pretty esoteric stuff, details, but we're back to 100 now. Let that dry overnight and then he can get back to work. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you.